The laughter cut too loud for a morning diner. Cups stilled. Even the coffee steam seemed to listen. At the far end of the counter, a jacket faded to gray held its place without defense. The young Marines leaned closer, their voices sharp against the hush, and silence carried on one steady breath, answered louder than words. Mara Cade sat at the far end of the counter where the light pooled warmest. Her jacket, once regulation green, had faded to riverstone gray. The cuffs were frayed, the elbows patched upon patches, the stitching neat and patient. Coffee warmed her hands, but not because she was cold. She liked the quiet weight. "Maybe it's glued on," a young Marine said, elbowing his buddy. "Like memories you can't wash out." "Maybe it's a thrift store trophy," another laughed. Their voices were too bright for the hour, the laughter brittle at the edges. The waitress hovered with the pot. "Refill?" she asked Mara under the noise. "Just a warm-up," Mara said. Her voice carried like late-night radio, low, steady, no need to compete. She didn't turn toward the Marines. She watched a curl of steam rise, vanish, and rise again. "Sir, we're talking to you," the first Marine called. "Jacket like that ought to come with a story." "Or a warning label," his friend added. "Hush now," the waitress said, setting a saucer with gentle precision. "Coffee's hot. Mouths don't have to be." "We're just having fun, ma'am," the second Marine protested. "Veterans Day weekend. We're honoring tradition." By heckling it, she asked, not moving the pot. The bell coughed. An older couple from the post office stepped inside, shaking the cold from their sleeves. Outside, the flag tapped the pole twice and rested. The town's radio set low near the register hummed a tune that remembered harmony. "You hear us, sir?" a third Marine tried again, half grin, half dare. "Why keep it?" Mara's thumb found a loose thread at the cuff. She drew a breath that might have been the beginning of an answer and let it go. Choosing silence felt like laying a hand on a restless shoulder. Not force, not surrender, just steadiness. "He can hear," the second Marine said. "He just won't answer." Maybe the jacket's all he's got to say, the first guest, pleased with his own wit. The waitress set the pot down. "You boys want breakfast or an audience chili fries," one said, then added, "and a story if the gentleman's selling." "Stories cost more than fries," she said. Down the counter, Private Chen, youngest of them, watched the steam from his own cup with the earnestness of a new recruit doing everything by the book. He glanced at Mara's sleeves, at the careful repairs. He didn't laugh. Sir Chen said, tentative, "The weather's dropping." "That jacket looks warm." "Warm enough," Mara answered. "I meant I know," she said, softening the words with a small nod. The first Marine leaned back. Maybe he slept in it. Maybe he never took it off after basic. "Some folks never left the parade," another chimed. "Some folks never found it," the waitress said, topping off Mara's cup, "and still learned to march when it mattered." Silverware clicked. The cook rang a bell. Butter hissed under eggs. Small-town mornings keep working, even when unkindness tries to interrupt them. "You're awfully quiet, sir," the third Marine called. "We're only asking." "Questions are free," Mara said at last. "Answers charge interest." "So that's a no." "That's a not yet," she replied. He snorted. "What classified eat your breakfast?" the waitress said before it classifies as cold. The couple from the post office slid onto a bench. The man removed his cap with the reverence of someone who knew when and why to uncover his head. He watched the boys the way old men watch weather, measuring how long it might last. "Seriously, old man," the first Marine insisted. "Why keep that ragged jacket?" "To remember how it fit," Mara said, "and who I was when it did." "Deep," the second said, rolling his eyes. Respectfully, Chen offered, "Some things are kept because they still work." You siding with him, Buddha buddy, teased. I'm siding with warmth, Chen said. And with breakfast. The waitress hid a smile. She moved down the line, refilling cups, the spout clicking lightly against porcelain, like a metronome for decency. She stopped at Mara again. Tip jars by the register. If gratitude gets restless, she said. I'll leave enough to calm it, Mara answered. The radio found a harmony. The bell coughed. Wind shouldered the door and then gave it back. Mara reached for a napkin, and the motion tugged the seam near her shoulder. The fabric shifted just a blink, revealing the faint curve of something stitched and old beneath the worn outer cloth. Chen saw it first. His breath hitched. Sir, what the first Marine asked, craning. Nothing the second said too quick. Probably a thrift store logo. Looks like a patch. The third murmured, uncertain for the first time. Mara placed 2 bills beneath her empty plate and tapped the rim twice with a forefinger, a habit shaped by years of counting without letting anyone see. She slid off the stool. Leather soles folded softly under her weight. The jacket settled as if shrugging away a decade. Heading out, the waitress asked. I'll be where the coffee's honest, Mara said. That'd be here, she replied. Then I'll be back, she said, and the pronoun slid past like a leaf on water, unnoticed by the loud and honored by the few who listened. We're just joking, the first Marine said into the space she left. Then you won't mind if the joke stops now, the waitress answered. The older man at the booth tipped his cap a half-inch. The woman folded her hands and let the moment quiet itself. Outside, the flag tapped the pole twice and lay still, as if told to rest. At the register, Mara placed her tip in the jar. Coins chimed, a small sound exact and sufficient. She pushed the door with a palm that knew the weight of heavier doors. Cold air met warm. Light found the torn elbow and made it gold. Chen's eyes tracked the shoulder as Mara turned. For the briefest beat, the cloth lifted, and the edge of a unit patch peaked, colors faded threadwork, exact pride folded instead of flown. He blinked. What patch, one Marine demanded. He couldn't say. It had already slipped back under the worn outer layer, the way a bird folds into hedge and leaves only the memory of wings. Cliffhanger. As Mara stepped into the bright, cold morning, the jacket shifted once more, and the faint outline of the patch flashed there, then gone like a story deciding whether to be told. The post office kept a steady rhythm, thump, slide, thump, as the clerk stamped envelopes and sent them on their way. Paper dust sweetened the air like chalk after a hymn. Radio oldies leaked from a back room, the singer promising someone they'd be loved forever if they could just be patient. Mara Cade stood in line with a manila envelope tucked beneath her arm. Her jacket looked quieter in daylight, the threadbare elbows softened to a kind of dignity. Private Elijah Chen cued 2 spots back the pack on his shoulders, shifting like a restless thought. Too loose, said the woman in front of him, knitting peeking out from her tote. You'll tire your back by noon. Chen smiled. Yes, ma'am. I'll fix it. Mara turned a little, not enough to make it a production. May I? She asked, Chen palm open. Please, he said, stepping forward. She shortened the right strap, lengthened the left, then cinched the sternum band with 2 calm tugs. There. Now the weight rides the bones that like carrying it. Feels better, Chen said, testing a breath. Thank you. Posture is cheap medicine, Mara replied. The door swung. 2 of the young Marines from the diner shouldered in, voices one shade too loud for a room that ran on patience. Their laughter rattled the glass door as it closed. There he is, same jacket, one said with a grin for his buddy. Maybe the moths pay rent. The knitter gave a small shake of her head. Gentlemen, this building prefers whispers. We're just ribbing, ma'am, the Marine said. Holiday mood. From somewhere near the flyer wall came a low passing line of gossip, almost a breeze, au rach, the sow. The phrase skated down the queue and vanished. Why fret a ragged jacket? A question asked in another tongue answered by the way people squared their shoulders and made room. The clerk stamped. Thump. Sir Chen tried keeping his voice soft. May I ask about the jacket? You may. Mara said. Back at the diner, I thought I saw most folks see what they have time for, she said. Is it a unit patch? Some patches say where you were, she answered. A few say who stood quietly beside you. The rare ones mean both. The Marine behind Chen snorted. Hear that? He's rehearsed it. Maybe the patch reads property of Thrift Mart, his buddy added. The knitter turned. Sir, she said to the first Marine, I've taught third graders to use their inside voices. Shall we practice? He half laughed, half checked himself. Yes, ma'am. The line inched. A retired mail carrier in a ball cap touched the brim toward Mara, then toward Chen Manners, folded and unfolded like letters. The bulletin board smelled faintly of paste and old tape. Choir rehearsal notice. Library board meeting. A picture of last year's wreaths in the veterans section, green circles against clean snow. You were in before us, Sir Chen asked. Before a lot of things, Mara said. We're between lines on maps. She adjusted her envelope. They move. The door squeaked again. The two other Marines from breakfast stepped in, making four. They clocked the jacket, then each other. Still wearing the legend, old man, one said. It's Veterans Day weekend, the second muttered to his friend. Show some, we are showing, the first insisted. We're showing interest. The clerk called, next, the line moved. The radio crooned another chorus, the melody soft as a folded flag. Chen cleared his throat. Sir, not to pry, you're not, Mara said. You're asking so the room can hear you ask. Because it matters. Because you think it might, she corrected, and there was kindness in it. The knitter leaned toward the Marines. Boys' kindness is lighter than regret. Carry the first. They subsided by a notch. A child near the stamp machine stared at the jacket, as if it might tell a bedtime story if you kept still enough. The line curved past the bulletin board. Mara's sleeve brushed cork. The jacket tugged, and for a breath the cloth at her shoulder opened like a shutter. A crescent of patch showed faded exact threadwork, tight as a promise. It wasn't bright. It didn't need to be. Two retired men stopped mid-whisper. One adjusted his glasses with hands that remembered sorting mail in storms. Chen saw it too. His voice thinned. Sir Mara's hand lowered, and the jacket fell closed again, the way a bird tucks wing beneath leaf. The clerk lifted his gaze. Next, ma'am. Mara stepped forward, slid her envelope under the glass. Just one, she said. Any special handling? It knows where to go. Thump, slide. She turned back toward the door. The Marines shifted as if to speak. The knitter laid a yarn-soft glance on them, and they swallowed their lines. Chen moved with her. Mara, may I call you Mara? You just did. I don't want to be disrespectful. You haven't been. I keep thinking, if I saw what I think I saw. Then let the thought be enough for now, she said. Some truths ripen best off the vine. Yes, ma'am. The door gave them a square of cold. Street salt crackled underfoot. Outside Main Street looked like a postcard that someone had touched with a warm thumb, a dog tying its person to a bench with its leash. A bakery bag passed between kids, the flag pausing against its pole as if listening. Behind them, the Marines filtered out in pairs, voices lower pride, busy finding a better shape. Still think it's a thrift patch, one asked, but there wasn't much heat left in it. I think the other began, then didn't finish. They watched Mara walk. The jacket moved with her the way an old song moves a room, not loudly, but completely. Chen felt the pack sitting right against his frame, riding the bones built for carrying. "Thank you for the straps," he said. "Gratitude travels light," Mara replied. "May I walk you back?" "You may walk beside me," she said. They crossed toward the diner, the radio in the post office fading to a hum. At the corner, one nudged the shoulder seam, and the patch's curve appeared for an instant there, unmistakable to any eye that knew the difference between cloth and meaning. Chen's breath clouded, then cleared. "That patch, what is it?" The afternoon light in the diner turned soft and forgiving, catching on chrome napkin holders and the glass dome over a pecan pie. Steam lifted from fresh coffee like ribbon. Outside, the flag fluttered, paused and fluttered again, a quiet metronome reminding the town what weekend it was. The young Marines came in together, shoulders expanding, as groups do when laughter asks for an echo. Private Elijah Chen drifted a step behind them, quiet as a book on a crowded shelf. Round two old man, the first Marine called down the counter, letting his grin do the pushing. "We still want the story. Maybe the patch says, 'Try harder,'" another cracked. "Or 'Do not disturb,'" a third added. Laughter sharpened edges, bright the kind that leaves a small scratch even when it means to miss you. The waitress wiped the same square of counter twice. "Gentleman chili sings when you eat it hot." "We eat and ask," the first Marine said, tugging a stool. "Multitasking." Mara Kay didn't turn. She lifted her cup, tested the temperature, set it down. "Coffee's honest," she said to the waitress. "Let it stay that way." "You hear that, poetry," one Marine murmured too loud. "Some folks wear metaphors to stay warm," another said, nudging a friend. The room shifted a degree, neighbors at booths quieting the way people do when they feel something tipping. The radio hummed a low harmony. The bell over the door clinked once and then held its breath. The smell of butter browning on the grill threaded through the chatter. Chen took the end stool near Mara and didn't speak. His pack sat square at his feet, straps set right from the post office lesson. He folded his hands, watched, and learned the way good soldiers do, eyes first. "Sir, we're just curious," the first Marine tried again. "What's the patch?" "Curiosity travels lighter without an audience," Mara said, not unkindly. "We're the audience for everything the second said. That's the point of uniforms." "That and laundry," the third added, and their laughter rose bright, then brittle. The waitress slid a basket of cornbread between them, and chit the exit. Warm first words later. "We can chew and talk," the first Marine said. "You can." "The room can't," she replied, softer than a scold, firmer than a suggestion. A pair of retired men came in and took a booth by the window. One of them, cap in his hands, looked toward Mara, then away, as if tipping a hat in his mind and saving the gesture for a better moment. Sir Chen asked quietly. "May I sit here and say nothing?" "You just did both," Mara said, and the small curve of her mouth felt like approval. "Do you see it?" one Marine whispered to the others, angling for a glimpse of cloth. Right there on their shoulder, the second corrected, unsure why the correction mattered, only that it did. "What are we even doing?" the third muttered, a sliver of doubt tilting the table. "We're asking," the first insisted, reclaiming volume. "And we'll keep asking." "Gentlemen," the waitress said, "there's a way to be right later. It usually starts with being quiet now." They chuckled, but the pitch dropped. The room, relieved, took a breath. "Okay, old man," the first Marine began, then glanced at Chen and softened, "Sir. If the patch matters, why hide it?" "Because it matters," Mara answered. "That's not an answer," the second Marine said, but he said it softer. "It is to the person with the patch," she replied. "He's got quips for days," the third muttered, but he was watching her hands instead of the room, now noticing how still they were. A gust popped the outside door and sent a brief chill through the aisles. The flag out front snapped once, then fell back into its proper fold. The radio blurred, caught, and settled into a hymn a baritone could sing, without forcing notes, steady as shoe leather. Sir Chen said low, "Thank you again for the straps." "Small things make long miles," Mara said. "I thought of that all the way here." "Thinking is the cheaper half of doing," she replied, and his smile found the counter instead of the Marines. "Listen," the first Marine said, aiming at good-natured and overshooting, "we respect service. We just want specifics," the second supplied. "Want to salute the right story," the third said, trying on sincerity like a jacket borrowed from a friend. "Stories don't grow faster because you yell at them," the waitress said, replenishing coffee, the pot ticking porcelain in little blessings. The retired man in the booth folded his cap and set it down as if that too were a kind of listening. "He's dodging," the first Marine pressed. "Or choosing," Chen said. He didn't raise his voice. He tuned it to reach the table without touching the room. "Sometimes the quiet is the story." That sentence landed with a soft thud, like a letter pushed through a mail slot present addressed enough. "Boot's been reading quotes," one Marine joked, but he didn't sound convinced. Mara lifted her mug, and the jacket moved the way old cloth moves, slow, obedient to memory. The seam near her shoulder eased, then settled, showing just a breath of threadwork before hiding it again. The Marines leaned forward as one body. The waitress didn't. "There." The first Marine's voice lost a step of swagger. "I saw it." "You saw a corner," the second said. "Corners are where things begin," the third replied, surprising himself. Knives clicked against plates. Someone near the door cleared a throat and decided not to speak. The light on the pie dome brightened a degree, as if the sun approved of restraint. "If it's what I think it is," the first Marine said, "you'd do what your grandparents taught you." The waitress said, "You'd stand up straight, and you'd let your mouth rest." He closed it without argument. Chen folded his hands tighter. His silence grew taller, not heavier. Mara set her cup down. "When the room is ready, it will know," she said, ready for what the second Marine asked. "To treat a patch like a name," she answered. Spoken once, then carried correctly. Outside, the flag lifted again, caught a clean line of wind, and held steady as if a pair of old hands had taken it up. The bell over the door coughed. Heat breathed out. Cold stepped in, wearing navy wool and brass at the cuffs. The diner adjusted without being told, hats straightened, napkins, smoothed backs, lengthened by an inch, no one measured. The waitress poured before he asked. A good house knows who is thirsty by the way they cross the threshold. General Bramwell, one of the retired men, said barely above a prayer. "Evening, folks," the general answered, voice cut from old hymn book pages and field briefings, the kind that arrives already weighted with purpose. He lifted a hand to thank the waitress and stopped mid-gesture, as if time itself had tapped his shoulder. His gaze had found Mara's. The jacket had turned just enough in the light, the worn fabric bending the way river water bends around a familiar rock. For a heartbeat only, that the patch showed clear thread, quiet colors, faithful, the shape of history politely requesting the floor. The Marines didn't breathe. Chen didn't move. The general didn't blink. Cliffhanger. He froze where he stood, eyes fixed on the jacket. The hush came first clean whole, almost physical, washing the chatter from the diner and leaving the shape of a room that suddenly remembered how to listen. The bell above the door, which had coughed and clinked all day, held its tongue. Forks hovered. Coffee cooled without complaint. Outside, the flag settled into its proper fold, as if an old pair of hands had smoothed it. General Bramwell stood just inside the threshold, winter wool dark against the glass brass at his cuffs, catching a thin blade of light. He had that particular stillness some men carry after long service, the kind that suggests a square mile of silence can be moved if the mission requires it. He lifted a hand to thank the waitress for the cup she was already pouring, then stopped mid-gesture, as if a memory had stepped between him and the moment. His eyes had found Mara's shoulder. The jacket turned a fraction fabric, easing like river water around a familiar stone. The patch showed not bright, not hungry for attention, but as inevitable as a bell at the end of a ceremony. Thread that had known weather colors that had stayed faithful under 1,000 washings, an exactness that refused to brag. The room knew it before it understood it. Some things do that. No one reached for a phone. No one whispered a name. Even the radio seemed to lower itself, the melody flattening into a faint, steady hum like a choir, testing a single pitch before a hymn. In that sound, the foyer widened. The counter lengthened, the booth by the window pushed back from its own edges to make more space for what was happening. It didn't take force to do that. It took recognition. The Marines who had filled the air with sharp laughter became very young, very fast. Their shoulders shrank a half-inch. Their hands forgot where to go. The joke still on someone's tongue lost its footing and fell through the floorboards. Private Chen's silence grew taller, not heavier. He watched the general's face the way a man watches a horizon when the weather decides to change. The general took one step, then another, each paced by years rather than doubt. He stopped within arm's length of Mara. The waitress who had set a saucer at the counter for an ordinary evening stepped back the width of a breath. The retired men in the booth did not move at all. Age gives some people the wisdom to freeze their bodies, while their respect does the bowing for them. Mara did not reach for the cuff or the seam or the napkin. She did not lift a hand to block or reveal. She did not offer the patch like a medal or hide it like contraband. She stood jacket at ease on her shoulders, chin neither high nor low. The light found the worn elbow and made it honest. The general drew himself to full height, not because ceremony demanded it, but because gratitude did. A sound moved across the room. The lightest rustle, the softest intake, and then everything stilled into that precise, quiet room's keep for weddings, for farewells, for the moment before an anthem. "I know that patch," he said. 4 words. They landed like a folded flag placed into waiting hands. The Marines froze as if the order had been given at parade ground volume. Laughter, sharp, eager, careless, died mid-breath and did not leave a body. The room's air, which an hour earlier had carried coffee and butter and easy jokes, now carried only the fact of those words and the distance they had traveled to arrive here intact. The general's right arm came up with the unhurried certainty of countless mornings when the sun had found him already in formation. Fingers together, palm flat, angle exact. The salute held steady, not iron stiff, but living, breathing, a statement made in muscle and bone. For a heartbeat, it belonged to him alone. Then, by some unspoken arithmetic of respect, it filled the foyer, the counter, the aisle between booth and pie case. It filled the diner. No one told it to. Mara did not answer with a salute. She did not have to. She gave one small nod, the nod of a person who has long since traded theater for truth. In that motion lives an entire grammar acknowledgement without appetite, acceptance without claim, the kind of reply that lets the other person keep what they needed to give. The general held the salute a breath longer, as if to sign his name to it, then lowered his hand. For a moment, the edges of his mouth tightened, the way a soldier's do when the past rises behind the eyes like old terrain. He did not look away. The faint hum in the radio found a companion tone somewhere in the church hall, down the street. A choir rehearsed note was trying out the ceiling. The sound entered the diner like a helpful memory. The waitress, who had learned to read rooms by watching coffee cool and warm again, let the pot hover at hip level, neither pouring nor retreating, a respectful truce. Across the counter, one Marine tried to shift weight from one foot to the other, then gave up and decided to be still. Another realized his cap was on inside and took it off, laying it against his chest as if the act had been waiting all afternoon for its cue. The third, who had supplied the best punchlines in the worst moments, stared at the tile and discovered it deserved attention too. Transfer of trust is not always an event. Often it is a redistribution authority leaving one set of hands that had never quite known what to do with it, and settling into quieter ones that need no proof to hold it. In that diner, trust walked across tile without making a sound, climbed a small step of worn wood, and took a seat nobody had offered, because it fit there naturally. The general breathed a long, contained breath. His gaze left the patch and found Mara's eyes. A flicker of recognition passed, not a secret exposed, not a myth, confirmed only two lives, recognizing the same weather. He spoke again, soft enough that the room could claim it heard without pretending to own it. It stands for more than places, he said almost to himself, and more than names. Mara's answer was not a word. It was the way she allowed her shoulders to drop half a degree, easing the jacket, as if to tell it, and everything it carried, rest a moment. The choir's hum carried on the thin evening air, rounded into something like a chord. Folks who had never taken a music lesson knew how to breathe with it. The retired man in the booth pressed his cap's brim against his thigh, then let his hand relax. He had been in rooms where medals flashed and speeches went on. He preferred this, no citation, no microphone, only a permission granted to behave as if decency were easy. The waitress found herself standing straighter than the day required. She was not certain whether to wipe the counter or fold her hands. She did neither. She let the moment be itself, the way you let a child finish a story without rushing the ending. A sugar packet tipped and stayed tipped. A fork leaned against a plate and did not fall. The bell above the door, sensing that it had already had enough lines for one day, kept silent. General One Marine tried, but the word came out young. The general did not reprimand him. He simply kept looking at Mara. Some lessons are more difficult to survive if they are explained out loud. Chen, who had asked to sit and say nothing, now discovered how much could be taught by an answer delivered without sound. He felt in his spine the line his sergeant had tried to describe on a chalkboard: respect is posture before it's a word. Outside, a small gust lifted the flag and set it back down exactly true to line. Inside, the salute remained in the air like warmth after a stove is turned off, no longer burning, but present, shaping the room in quiet ways. The waitress drew a breath. Coffee, she asked softly, to no one in particular, and to everyone at once. Thank you, the general said, returning to this world, letting his hand lower fully. He took the cup the way a man receives a sacrament, not because the coffee is holy, but because the act of being served while remembering who you serve allows gratitude to keep its footing. The Marines did not return to laughter. You cannot go back to a smaller room after it has been enlarged by mercy. Their faces arranged themselves into something like attention, though no order had been given. A second later, one of them began to straighten, then stopped unsure of the choreography of apology. Mara saved him from the need for it. She turned not away, not toward, but enough to offer the patch one last square of light before the jacket reclaimed it for the private work of meaning. The motion said, "We will not inventory this, we will carry it." The choir's hum from down the street rose a shade, found its footing, and flowed forward as if invited. The foyer accepted it. The counter framed it. Even the pie case glass let it pass without a smudge. The general set his cup down. The soft click of ceramic on laminate felt like a signature. He did not smile, not exactly. He allowed the corners of his mouth the courtesy of not denying what they felt. He looked once around the room at the waitress, at the retired men, at the Marines, who had been boys at lunch and were learning to be something else by supper. Then he returned his gaze to Mara. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried because truth reserves the right to be heard without shouting. "Do you know who you just mocked?" The general's question hung over the counter like a bell's last tone. No one answered. No one needed to. The room had already discovered its better posture. Coffee cooled in cups that should have been sipped and wasn't. The flag outside caught itself, then rested wind, choosing to listen with everyone else. The first to move was not the loudest Marine. It was Chen. He rose from the end stool boots, planted square shoulders, aligned the way a chalk line instructs a mason. He looked at Mara as if asking permission, and finding none required, lifted his hand. "Sir," he said, and the word shed boys' laughter and kept only bone and promise. His fingers came together, the angle set true. He saluted as if there were no one in the room but the person who had carried the weight before him. The waitress, who had learned the choreography of kindness one plate at a time, set down her tray and pressed an open hand to her heart. The gesture wasn't military. It didn't need to be. She stood the way church folks stand when a hymn's third verse arrives and everyone knows the words. At the booth, the retired men did not scramble for a better view. They had already seen everything necessary. One placed his cap on the table brim up. The other folded his hands and let his breath out slow, as if making room for an old story to sit at the edge of the table and be comfortable. The first Marine's mouth opened to make an explanation and closed again because apology formed, then recognized itself as smaller than the moment. He turned, found Chen's profile, and felt something dependable looking back at him, duty without theater. His own arm rose awkward at first, then truer fingers flattening, as muscle remembered what pride had forgotten. "Sir," he said, voice steadying, as it crossed the few feet between two lives. The second Marine followed softer, "Sir," the word rounding as it entered his mouth, losing swagger, gaining weight. He focused on the angle not to impress but to be honest. The third hesitated a beat, comedy reaching for a last line, then let it go, and came to attention, a man trying on honor and discovering the fit was right. One by one the young men stood. The hush did not press them down. It lifted them into place. Boots scuffed, then quieted. Palms found the air and held it respectfully. The line of salutes reached like a bridge from one end of the diner to the other, crossing pie case and napkin holder sugar packets and chipped mugs. A bridge built of posture. Mara acknowledged none of it. She didn't deny it either. She remained exactly as she had been, hands, quiet eyes, steady jacket, carrying its private geography beneath worn cloth. The general had saluted. That was the knight's signature. Everything after was echo proper and good. Down the street, the church hall doors had been propped with hymnals. Choir practice leaked into November air, a human chord trying itself against the dark. The sound drifted into the diner and curled around the counter, the way steam curls around a spoon. Sopranos found their ceiling. Tenors found the floor. Altos made a middle where people could stand. "Ma'am," the waitress whispered, though no one had moved to hush her. "Would you like me to let it be Mara?" said the words low and round, radio warm. "Let it be." The first Marine's wrist trembled. He breathed and the tremble steadied. He was finding a way to keep still that wasn't fear. The second blinked hard and blamed the air. The third focused on a nail head in the floor and decided it had earned attention. "Gentlemen," the general said at last, the syllables respectful even now, no lecture required. "You've corrected yourselves." "Yes, sir," came back down the line. Not a chant, not performed, simply true. The waitress stepped once toward the pie case, then stopped. She didn't want to break the surface. She adjusted an empty saucer to square with the counter's edge. A tiny act, reverent as a candle wick being trimmed. From outside, church voices rose and then blended. The rehearsal moved from parts to whole harmony, settling like a shawl over neighbors who had come without planning to the same measure of time. Through the window, a few parishioners slowed, looked in, and understood without asking. They did not crowd. They did not gawk. One older woman lifted 2 fingers in the smallest salute she knew and went on toward the hall hymnal tucked like a map beneath her arm. A boy at a corner table put down his fork and imitated the Marine nearest him, small palm to brow angle, imperfect intention, flawless. His father set a hand on the boy's shoulder and didn't correct him. Some lessons prefer to teach themselves. The retired man by the window finally moved. He reached for his cap, not to don it, but to turn it so the emblem faced the room. It wasn't the same patch. It didn't need to be. Patches can be cousins and still share a house. The first Marine lowered his hand, looked at Mara, then at the general, and found words that fit. "Sir, I—" "No," Mara said gently. "Keep the air for better uses." "Yes, sir." Ma'am Chen said, still at attention. "Permission to breathe," she answered, and his smile came and went like a fox at a hedgerow, real quick, sufficient. The salutes eased not into collapse, but into life. Men sat without slump. Voices returned without swagger. The room found its working sounds again, spoons, low talk, the sweet scrape of chair legs that didn't hurry. The waitress poured the general's coffee. He accepted it with the small nod that says a person remembers the many hands required to keep a day going. "On the house," she said. "No," he replied. "On the community." He placed cash beneath the saucer and touched the rim, once sealing the exchange. The first Marine turned to Chen. "Boot, you were first," he said. "Thank you." Chen shook his head. "I just stood up," he said. He'd already shown us how. He didn't nod toward Mara. He didn't need to. The line between them was already drawn, light, strong, useful. Across the street, the choir swelled and the hall doors fanned open to let the sound out. The notes found the diner again, and this time the room answered. People stood without being told, why the retired men at the window, the couple from the post office, the boy with his small, fierce salute. Even the cook in his paper hat stilled his spatula and looked toward the counter as if it were an altar made of formica and years. For one measured beat, the diner and the church breathed the same breath. Salutes finished their arc. Hands found hearts. Heads inclined. No proclamation was made. No photograph was taken. The moment kept its own records. Mara didn't move. That was her action. She would not inventory grace. She would witness it. The general set his cup down and let his palm rest briefly on the counter. He was not blessing the laminate. He was thanking the work that had kept it clean for this. The waitress picked up her tray and then set it down again empty. Her free hand went back to her heart, not because anyone asked, but because gratitude sometimes needs two hands. The Marines stepped back from the counter, not retreating, just making room. Their faces had the look people get after good counsel, lighter, if not easier. The radio under the register found a last chord and held it a quiet hum beneath choir and breath and the soft tick of the pie case cooling. Someone no one could later say who said it into the calm, a sentence shaped like a promise and a warning both. Respect can be louder than any laughter. The town settled after the kind of evening that teaches a room to keep its voice down. Night pressed its cool shoulder against the windows. Porch lights blinked on one by one as if someone walked the block with a careful thumb. In the small house just off Main, the porch swing creaked its old hymn Forward Back. Forward back, keeping time with the faint static of a radio that was almost but not quite tuned. Mara Cade sat with her hands around a mug gone warm to merely comfortable. The jacket lay across her now, not worn this time, but resting the way a tool sits on a bench after the work has been done and refuses to explain itself. The fabric smelled faintly of wool and wind diner coffee and the page smell of the post office. When she moved her thumb across the cuff, she felt each stitch the careful mends upon mends like keystones in a small arch that had done its share of holding. On the radio, a DJ with a voice as round as November turned a dial until the static softened into a familiar tune. A woman sang about keeping the faith, and the melody poured through the screen door as if the tune itself knew the way. Across town, the library kept late hours on community nights. The board in the foyer, glass-fronted, cork-backed, held a patient patchwork of notices, blood drive, craft, circle, genealogy club. In the center, a new shadow box had found its place. The wood was not fancy. The glass was clean. Inside, the jacket hung on a narrow form that respected its shape. Beside it, a matte backing held the patch in an oval close enough to study, far enough to keep. A small card offered a line that did not insist on being read, on loan from a neighbor. No unit named, no dates to argue, just the fact of care. Private Elijah Chen stood at a modest distance, cap in his hands, letting his eyes learn the jacket the way you learn a familiar road in evening light. The building smelled of paper and lemon oil. Somewhere in the stacks, a clock ticked like a tranquil metronome. Somewhere upstairs, a librarian rolled a cart that answered with small, honest squeaks. He stepped closer, then resisted the last 2 paces. It felt right to leave a little air between himself and the glass. He studied the threadwork in the patch, how the colors had become their truest selves by fading, how the edges looked soft, until you looked long enough to see the discipline in the stitches. He thought of the strap adjustment, shorten, right, lengthen, left, cinch the sternum, and how a small, exact lesson could change the weight of a day. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a librarian whispered, appearing from the side like a footnote arriving at the right paragraph. "Yes, ma'am," Chen said. "And quiet." "We prefer that here," she smiled. "Quiet things have more room to work." He nodded. The reflection in the glass handed him his own face next to the jacket's patient curve. For a moment, the two sat together as if compared. He set his cap against his chest without instruction. The gesture felt less like a salute than a promise. Outside, the church hall emptied in 2s and 3s. Voices glided past the library doors, neighbors smoothing out the day with talk soft as wool. A choir member paused, glanced through the glass, and lifted a gentle hand before continuing down the steps. The town, which understood the usefulness of modesty, kept moving without turning the moment into an event. Back on the porch, the swing marked a lazy rhythm. The last heat of the mug worked into Mara's palms, and then left, as warmth always does, refusing to stay where it isn't needed. She let the jacket slide from her lap to the swing beside her, then folded it once careful as a benediction and set it on the cushion. In the radio's small glow, the patch caught a sleepy piece of light, then let it go. "You all right out here?" the neighbor called from his walkway, voice low, so as not to chase off the song. "I am," Mara said. "Saw the library board on my way back," he added. "Looks right." "It looks like it will be cared for," she replied. "That's the best look," he said, tipping his head. The porch light reached him, and then didn't, and he kept moving steps friendly with the sidewalk. Mara rocked the swing a little harder. The chain answered with a grateful squeak. Wind threaded the maple leaves and left them tidy, the way a passerby straightens a picture frame with 2 fingers. Somewhere down the block, a screen door clicked. Somewhere up the block, somebody laughed once and then softened it with a hand remembering. She had said little at the diner and nothing at the library, and yet the day had filled itself the right way. Honor had traveled across tile and glass, across formica and oak, across coffee steam and dust motes without asking for a speech to carry it. She breathed slow and level, remembering the weight of the pack she no longer wore, the feel of rain in other latitudes, the way silence can be a shelter if you keep it clean. The radio shifted to a softer tune, the kind you hum while putting dishes away. The DJ let a pause ride an extra second, then spoke with that affectionate patience older voices have for younger towns. The porch light drew one quick insect and let it go. The evening settled deeper onto the street like a quilt pulled up to a chin. At the library, Chen took one last look and stepped back. He read the small card again, not for information, but for the habit of making sure. He tugged his cap into place, turned toward the doors, and paused. In the reflection, the patch seemed to hold a second of light just for him. He gave it a nod, which wasn't regulation, and was exactly correct. "Good night," the librarian said. "Good night, ma'am," he answered. "Thank you for making room." "That's what libraries are," she said. "Rooms for what should be kept." He smiled and went down into the evening boots, respectful of the steps, shoulders set to carry the lighter kind of weight. Mara listened to his footsteps without knowing them, the way experienced people can feel a good choice being made 2 blocks away. She reached for the dial, found a clearer version of the same song, and eased the volume down until it matched the swing's soft creak. The jacket rested beside her patient, as a kept promise. If it missed the past, it did not say so. If it remembered names, it did not trade them for praise. In time, the breeze lifted, and with it the faint smell of paper and lemon oil. The scent crossed the town easily, the way certain news does when it refuses to call itself news. She closed her eyes and let the quiet work, not because she needed it to, but because it knew how. A small moth practiced being a visitor around the porch light. The radio's static thinned into a clean line, then softened again. The night carried its own sermon and did not demand an altar to deliver it. Mara slid her palm once across the jacket's sleeve, over patch across seam, down to the place where hands rest when the talking's done. She let the swing slow. The chain sighed, then waited. Sometimes silence is the loudest thank you. The diner's steam had long cooled, and the town found its rhythm again, church bells drifting over winter coats, a porch swing creaking beneath steady hands, and a library light left on after hours. What began in mockery and sharp laughter had been answered by steady presence, then reshaped into justice and a dignity the room could carry forward. Like a single thread in a quilt, kindness wove unnoticed through small gestures, an adjusted strap, a quiet refill, until the whole pattern revealed itself as stronger than scorn. In the library foyer, a framed patch now rests in plain sight, held behind glass, as a reminder that respect belongs to communities, not just to ranks. Sometimes, silence is the loudest thank you.